Hey there. Welcome to Back to Ashes. My name is Phoenix. To the elites, thank you so much for your love and dedication. It comes back tenfold. If you are new to the channel, hi, I'm a human. There's a lot of people who think I'm AI because of my voice or the way I read. No, I'm human. If you're new here, please leave a like and a comment if you begin to like what you're hearing. It not only lets me know that you like the videos I'm putting out, but it also lets YouTube know that you like my content and kind of helps push it into the algorithm so others can enjoy as well. If you would like to join Back to Ashes, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and set your bell notification to all. That way you know every time I upload a video. With that being said, it is now time to go back to Ashes. So sit back, relax, kick back, grab a snack, or tuck in and get warm, and prepare for your dose of vocal melatonin entitled True Crazy Stories. Right after this intro, there will be an ad. Because the first story is so long, the second ad is going to fall probably around the 8-minute mark. And after that, there will be no more ads within this video. I hope you all enjoy. My name is Kathy, and I grew up in New England. This is a memory from when I was 12 years old, nearly half a century ago now. My family left Providence, Rhode Island, and relocated to the small town of East Corinth, Maine. My father had built his construction business from the ground up, and once it became successful, he had enough money to purchase a lovely 3-story house right on Main Street. He told us it was important for my younger brother and me to grow up surrounded by the kind of traditional, close-knit community values you only find in a place like that. To my brother and me, though, it felt like we'd been dropped into a completely foreign country. We traded the bustle of our city for a quiet town where the main point of interest was the local Historical Society Museum. At first, none of us were thrilled, my mother included, but within just a few days, the charm started to win us over. The meals at the little diner were incredible. There were basketball courts a short walk from our house, the nights were wonderfully silent, and the people were genuinely warm and friendly. The pastor stopped by the day we arrived to welcome us. Neighbors brought over homemade baskets filled with treats. That first weekend, 2 girls from the house directly across the street, Jenny, who was 14, and her sister Joy, 12, came knocking to see if I wanted to join them. They led me down the courts where the local kids spent their free time. There was a softball diamond, a couple of basketball hoops, a tennis court, and then a thick line of trees marking the edge of some woods. Jenny and Joy explained that all the parents were fine with everyone gathering there because the area was visible from the road, so adults could keep watch. But they were very clear about one rule. Never, under any circumstances, go past those trees into the woods. They had a reason for the warning, and his name was Trent Baxter. According to the girls, the Baxter family lived in the run-down Manor Road apartment on the far side of the woods. 15-year-old Trent was supposedly the worst troublemaker in the entire county. His father was in prison with no release date in sight, and his mother was an alcoholic who barely functioned. Trent had been expelled from school years earlier for constant violence. He fought other students, threw furniture at teachers, and once allegedly tried to flush the classroom hamster down the toilet until it drowned. The town had ways of keeping him in check. Whenever he wandered too close to our side of town or the courts, someone from the town council would spot him from their window and threaten to call the sheriff. So Trent mostly stayed in the woods near his apartment complex, setting traps for small animals and starting little fires to amuse himself. I thanked them for the warning, but since Trevor never came near the courts and didn't attend school, I assumed he wouldn't cross my path. That assumption turned out to be dangerously mistaken. During my first walk to the courts, Jenny and Joy gave me the broad outline of the Baxter problem. A few days later, on a Friday, they came by again and invited me to hang out with the bigger group of kids. That's when I received a more detailed and alarming picture of Trent. A boy named Stevie, who also lived in the Manor Road apartment, told me that Trent had flown into a rage the moment he learned a new family had moved in. Stevie wasn't like Trent. He wasn't destructive or cruel. He often joined us on weekends and shared stories about the chaos Trent caused at home. He described how Trent tormented an elderly widower on the ground floor by pounding on his door, knowing the man had a weak heart. He targeted pets in the building, and there were dark whispers that he'd once fed a neighbor's dog a sandwich laced with ground glass. That same Friday evening, to my horror, Stevie revealed that Trent's latest fixation was my family. He'd overheard Trent ranting that he was going to set our house on fire because we had dared to invade his territory. Jenny, Joy, and the others quickly reassured me that Trent made wild threats constantly, but he seldom followed through. They insisted he was mostly talk. I wanted to believe them, yet I couldn't shake the question. If he was harmless, why did everyone fear him so much? When I got home that night, I told my mother everything I'd heard. She'd already picked up unsettling rumors about the Baxters from neighbors who'd visit us. Still, she reminded me that East Corinth was full of decent, hard-working people who wouldn't let one troubled boy run the town. Her calm confidence helped far more than the kids' words ever could. I started to think the whole thing might blow over. I was wrong. About a week after we'd settled in, I jolted awake in the middle of the night to a tremendous crash downstairs. My father grabbed his pistol from the closet and hurried down. In the family room, we found a brick lying on the carpet amid shattered glass. Tied to it was a single-word note: "Move." The next morning, he reported it to the county sheriff's office. A deputy named Daniels arrived. He'd grown up nearby and claimed to know the Baxters well. He promised to track down Trent's whereabouts from the previous night, but he warned it wouldn't be simple. Trent's mother frequently vanished for days, chasing liquor and men, and Trent himself often fled into the woods when things got heated. Even if they did locate him, there was no hard evidence linking him to the brick. The one piece of optimism Daniels offered was that Trent rarely repeated the same stunt. He was impulsive, not methodical. If we stayed patient, he'd lose interest and move on to someone else. My father nodded, and they replaced the broken window. He called it adjustment panes. Every place has a few bad apples, but here there were only one or two, not an entire city full of them. My mother agreed, saying all Trent needed was a firm warning to understand we weren't easy targets. For several nights, Dad sat quietly in the darkened family room, watching the streets, hoping to catch Trent in the act and give him a scare. But nothing happened. The deputy seemed correct. At school, Joy and Jenny expressed sympathy when they heard about the brick. Their kindness made the fear easier to handle. Joy echoed the deputy's prediction. If Trent realized he was the main suspect, he'd vanish for a while, and life would return to normal. For the next week or so, everything was quiet. The window was fixed. Dad stopped his late-night vigils, and we began to relax. Then, The birds appeared. One morning, my father stepped outside to run to the store for milk and stopped dead. His prized Cadillac Fleetwood was covered in dead, mutilated animals. Their bodies had been slit open, entrails pulled out and spread across the hood and roof. Their heads were missing. Dad went back inside and called the sheriff, who spent the next hour removing the carcasses and power washing the car until it gleamed again. When he finally got behind the wheel to drive to the store, the engine choked weakly. He tried again. A strange hiss came from the rear, followed by thumps, and then a violent explosion erupted from the tailpipe. He rushed to the back and saw blood pouring from the exhaust. Scattered on the ground were all the severed bird heads. That afternoon, Deputy Daniels returned. Over coffee in our kitchen, he suggested Dad keep the car garage going forward. When they caught Trent, he'd face charges for animal cruelty. A brick was one thing, but butchering animals fit Trent's pattern perfectly. The deputy thought Trent was probably lying low after this escalation, perhaps delivering one final act of defiance before giving up. My parents clung to that hope, but it was only wishful thinking. 2 weeks passed without incident. We started to believe the worst was over. Then, one morning at around 8 o'clock, someone pounded on the front door. Dad answered in his robe and slippers. The mail carrier stood there, pale and shaking, pointing at the stoop. A red plastic gasoline can sat there, half full, next to an unopened box of matches. It was unmistakably a message. Leave now, or next time the threat becomes reality. That was the third visit from Deputy Daniels. This time my parents were far less composed. My father demanded the deputy do his job. How hard could it be to locate one juvenile delinquent? Daniels absorbed the anger without argument. He admitted the Baxters were a long-standing burden on the town, like the endless gray clouds that roll across Maine. People learned to endure them. Trent had never actually burned a house before. He pointed it out, but that brought no comfort. By then, I was deeply shaken. I'd grown to love East Corinth. The friends, the slower pace, the thought of starting high school there. The notion that one disturbed boy could destroy everything was crushing. The fear sharpened the day I learned Trent had singled me out. During lunch in the school cafeteria, Stevie slid onto the bench beside Joy and me. His expression told me something was wrong. He explained that he'd been biking near the apartments when Trent stepped out of the bushes and ordered him to stop. Stevie stopped, unafraid because he could easily outrun him on the bike. Trent asked if Stevie was friends with the new kid, me. When Stevie said yes, Trent declared that I was dead meat. Since my family hadn't left town, Trent was escalating, and the escalation meant coming after me personally. Terror washed over me. Only Joy and Stevie's promises kept me from breaking down completely. They swore that if I joined them that evening by the courts, they'd surround me and keep me safe. Bullies thrived when they can isolate someone. Strength lay in numbers. In that moment, I felt overwhelming gratitude mixed with dread. I'd never been so afraid of anyone, yet I'd never felt so welcomed and protected. I hugged Joy tightly, tears in my eyes, thanking her and Jenny for making me feel at home and standing between me and the town's monster. When I got home, I told my mother the latest threat. She said how fortunate I was to have such loyal friends, but if I spotted Trent that evening, I was to come straight home so she and Dad could summon the sheriff. She trusted my friends to watch out for me, but the safest choice was always to flee at the first sign of danger. I suggested that if enough people witnessed Trent attacking, the authorities would finally have to act. Maybe a few bruises would be worth getting him locked away. My mother shut that idea down immediately. Real violence wasn't like the movies. One blow could cause permanent damage or land someone in prison for life. She wanted Trent punished, but not if it meant risking her daughter. Around 5:30 that afternoon, Jenny and Joy came by. We walked to the courts together. The usual group was there, shooting baskets, riding bikes, laughing. I was nervous at first, but the normal routine soothed me. After about an hour, I was actually enjoying myself and had forgotten the fear. Then, Stevie came tearing across the field from the direction of the woods, shouting, "Trent's coming! Trent's coming!" Panic rippled through the group. An older boy named Ryan shouted that he was tired of running. He wanted to stand up to Trent for once. Several others agreed, chanting that it was time to fight back. I hesitated, remembering my mother warning about violence. But Jenny and Joy urged me forward, saying we should make sure Trent left me alone for good. Anger flared inside me. I'd come to love this place. I refused to let one creep destroy it. Ryan and the others charged across the field, yelling threats. It felt heroic. I stood, told Jenny and Joy, "Let's go," and they cheered. We ran to join the group. At the tree line, we spread out and pushed deeper into the woods, the sun filtering through the branches. Together, we felt brave. After a while, I stopped and looked around. There was no sign of anyone. "See," I said to Jenny, "he's gone." But the look on her face was cold, completely unfamiliar. I glanced around and realized every single kid was staring at me with the same detached expression. I spun in place. They began closing in. Behind me, Jenny's voice cut through the silence. "That's where you're wrong. Trent Baxter is right here." I turned just as she shoved me hard. I stumbled backward and landed in the dirt. "Here," she shouted. The betrayal hit harder than the fall. I asked what she was doing. No answer. Then a vicious insult flew from my right, followed by a kick to the side of my head. I dropped, clutching my skull. The others piled in, kicking relentlessly. "Trent Baxter's right here," someone mocked, and laughed mixed with the blows. Sneakers slammed into my arms, ribs, back, legs. I curled up, protecting my head as best I could. When someone tried stomping on my skull, survival instinct took over. I fought to my knees, got shoved down, struggled up again, then lunged forward and managed to stand. I ran. They chased, trying to trip me, but adrenaline carried me. I sprinted until I burst out of the woods and onto my street. Only then did I realize no one was behind me anymore. I glanced back, wondering where Jenny and Joy had gone. They lived right across the street from me. As I neared home, I saw a small crowd in front of our house. My mother, a neighbor woman, and Jenny and Joy. My heart plummeted. Mom rushed over and guided me inside. I was too stunned to speak. I just wanted to wash the blood and dirt away and never look at those girls again. As she cleaned my cuts and bruises, Mom kept promising that Trent Baxter would pay dearly. The only ones leaving this town will be him and his mother in handcuffs. I sat silently while she worked, numb with shock. Hours after, I finally cried myself empty and soaked in a hot tub. I went to the living room and told her the truth. Mom, it wasn't Trent Baxter. It was the kids from the basketball courts. All of them. She stared, speechless. Jenny and Joy had raced ahead of me to tell everyone Trent had ambushed me in the woods. My version shattered that story and raised the possibility that Trent Baxter didn't exist at all. At first, she resisted. Neighbors had spoken of the Baxters many times. Surely the whole town couldn't be part of some elaborate prank. But when my father called the sheriff directly and pressed for answers, the truth unraveled. A records check showed no Baxter family had lived in East Corinth since 1934. Dad confronted Deputy Daniels, who now claimed he'd only been trying to comfort the new arrivals by pretending he could handle the situation. The sheriff apologized, calling Daniels young and overeager, but my father saw right through it. There were no Baxters. The town had created them. It took my father several days of quiet inquiries to confirm the full picture. Once he was certain, he moved us out without delay. We packed up, drove back to Providence, stayed in a hotel, then rented an apartment until he found a permanent home. We almost never spoke of East Corinth afterward. The experience was too painful to revisit. But every so often I think about it and wonder how it started. Perhaps the Baxters began as a convenient scapegoat for the town's frustration. Over the decades, the myth evolved into a tool, a shared fiction used to frighten and expel anyone who threatened the insular world they built. In the end, the real monsters weren't living in the woods. They were the ones smiling at us from across the street. For over 2.5 decades, I've served as a park ranger at Wind Cave National Park in the rugged western part of South Dakota. President Theodore Roosevelt helped establish this park in the early 1900s, making it one of the original 6 national parks in the country. The surface spans more than 50 square miles, featuring thick woodlands, mixed grass prairies, and jaggy rocky ridges. Yet the park draws its name from the extraordinary underground feature at its core, Wind Cave itself. This cave ranks as the largest of its type globally, boasting greater passage volume per cubic mile than any other known cave system. In simpler terms, it contains more subterranean tunnels beneath the park than anywhere else on Earth. Remarkably, explorers have mapped only about 10% of its vast network, leaving thousands upon thousands of miles of passages still untouchable. At the current pace of discovery, and assuming advancements in technology continue, it could take more than 6 centuries to chart every corner. The Lakota people, traditionally inhabitants of this land, referred to it as Washanaya. In their ancient stories, it served as a sacred living gateway through which their ancestors emerged from the underworld in the dawn of creation. They spoke of Toka, the first man climbing out from the shadows, while these tales carry the weight of myth. The idea of the cave as a breathless entity holding some truth. When atmospheric pressures outside exceeds that inside, air rushes in, equalizing the levels. The reverse happens too. Air flows outward. In the large chambers, this steady movement creates an eerie sensation, as though the ground beneath your feet is slowly inhaling and exhaling. The cave's unique breathing draws crowds of visitors annually, and most trips pass without incident. But one afternoon in September of 2003, a simply ordinary missing person report turned into an experience that haunts me to this day. At that point, I'd been stationed at Wind Cave for a little over 3 years. Late that chilly afternoon, my phone vibrated with an incoming call from the Grand Teton Interagency Dispatch Center, an immediate sign of trouble. The dispatcher relayed a frantic report from a hiker whose companion had chased after a child in Wind Cave and failed to return. Out of respect for the families and to avoid fueling online speculation, all referred to the missing individual as Hiker M and his friend as Hiker F. The two friends had been walking along the Lookout Point trail when they spotted a solitary young boy dashing towards the cave's entrance. No park staff were present at the time, and aware that the cave posed serious dangers, especially for a child, they shouted after him. The boy ignored them and kept going. Worried for his safety, both men pursued him. They caught sight of the child, squeezing into a tight side passage. Hiker M went in after him, promising Hiker F he'd be back shortly. Minutes stretched into longer waits with no sign of either. Eventually, Hiker F ventured in himself, shouting for his friend and the boy. But silence answered. Fearing he'd become lost too, he retreated to the surface and sprinted roughly 2 miles to regain cell service before dialing emergency services. I immediately notified the park superintendent and rallied our search and rescue crew, directing them to the cave entrance. By early evening, I arrived to find most of the team already gathered. 8 of us prepared to enter, including 2 experienced caving experts familiar with the park's unmapped sections. Hiker F remained on scene, visibly shaking, repeating his account over and over. After surfacing from his initial brief search, he'd scanned the area for any sign of the child's parents or group. Surely someone would be searching for a missing child. Finding no one nearby only deepened his alarm. I share his unease. How could a child be out there completely alone? We suited up with helmets, lights, and gear. The lead caver guided us through the narrow entrance, barely 2 feet across, where the cave's signature cool breeze watched over us as we squeezed inside. The passage widened just enough to move, but the jagged limestone walls and uneven floor demanded caution. Our headlamps revealed delicate blade-like formations resembling intricate stone lace or frozen spider silk. The specialists followed the route they judged most probable for Hiker M, leading us to a low, branching crawlway of a main path. We moved in single file, eventually dropping to our bellies as the tunnel constricted further, packs scraping the ceiling. Roughly an hour in, we discovered evidence. A scrap of torn blue cloth snagged on a sharp protrusion, likely from Hiker M's jacket. The find was ominous. He'd ventured further than anticipated, and the injury seemed likely. We pressed deeper, navigating the labyrinth of twists and forks, while the experts consulted maps frequently. Hiker M hadn't struck a charted route. His path veered into less explored territory. By midnight, we'd covered only about 2 miles, with passages growing increasingly confined. My shoulders scraped stone, forcing me to tilt my head sideways. More traces appeared, a partial handprint smudged on the wall, a clear boot mark in moist clay. Then, in a small chamber, we spotted a crushed water bottle, confirmed later as Hiker M's, beside a fresh, glistening smear of blood on the rock. The reality hit hard. He was injured, turning our operation into a race against time. The cave seemed to resist us, slits too narrow to pass, sudden drops requiring gear we lacked, dead-end pools of inky water. One such pool was Cowside Lake, an ancient feature where thin floating mineral rafts, known as cave rafts, glimmered on the calm surface. Silt along the edge had captured another perfect boot print. The water wasn't deep enough to submerge a standing person, and no body lay there. Yet, Hiker M had vanished. By 3 a.m., fatigue forced us back to the surface. We reassured Hiker F we'd resume at first light. Several hours later, reinforcements arrived, including elite members from the National Speleological Society, experts accustomed to multi-day expeditions in remote cave systems. We divided into teams, each pursuing different branches from the blood evidence. Within hours, more signs surfaced: a broken fingernail, additional blood smears. Still, no sign of the man himself. On day 3, we pushed into zones far beyond regular tourist path. My body ached, but the image of Hiker M alone in total blackness kept me moving. Nothing new that day. Day 4 brought a chilling discovery in a cramped chamber barely large enough to kneel. Deep, desperate claw marks gouged into the clay-covered wall. Nearby lay a shredded glove belonging to Hiker M. No remains, no further clues, just those frantic scratches and the ruined glove. The atmosphere shifted. Hope faded into grim acceptance that recovery might be impossible soon. Lost cavers who stay calm can often be located with signals or by waiting. Panic drives fatal errors. That night in my cabin, sleep evaded me. Visions of Hiker M, terrified and clawing at unyielding stone, replayed endlessly. Day 5 proved brutal. A volunteer caver became trapped in a tight crawl. Panic set in, leading to thrashing and screaming until we extracted him. He emerged shaken but unharmed and refused to re-enter. By day 6, we'd exhausted known leads. NSS teams charted potential new areas, but encountered only more barren tunnels and false hopes. One group mentioned hearing faint, breathy sounds, possibly the cave's natural airflow mimicking voices or whispers. In the afternoon, we made one last effort beyond Cowside Lake into slick, oppressive passages. Hours of crawling yielded nothing but shadows. At one moment, I glimpsed movement just outside my light reach. I swung the beam. Empty darkness. On the 7th day, the superintendent called off the active search. After a week with no vital signs, survival odds were vanishingly small. We'd endangered ourselves tirelessly, and I'd volunteer again without hesitation. Yet, all we had were scrapes, blood, and echoes. Hiker F collapsed in grief upon hearing the news, leaving the superintendent at a loss for words. I submitted my reports and returned to routine duties, leading surface tours, maintaining trails. We tightened security at the entrance to prevent repeats, and visitation dipped noticeably for a time. Months later, a caver stumbled across one final item in a distant, remote section. A single hiking boot, matching hiker M's size, half buried in clay. No blood, no other evidence, just the lone boot. We logged it, but it altered little. The cave had claimed him, and it kept its secret. I remain a ranger here, walking the trails and occasionally descending when required. But I avoid deep places unless absolutely necessary. When I must go below, my light stays bright, my senses sharp, and I try hard not to dwell on whatever might still lurk unseen in the endless dark. It all began during the sticky heat of August of 1979. My high school friend Mark had spent weeks complaining bitterly about his dead-end insurance job, the kind that slowly grinds your spirit into dust behind a flickering fluorescent light. Joey and I weren't faring much better, me drifting from one temporary office gig to the next. Joey hauling crates in a dimly lit warehouse for barely livable pay. The three of us were suffocating under routine, desperate for any kind of break, but none of us had the cash for a real vacation or the vacation time for anything longer than a long weekend. So we settled on camping. After some back and forth, we picked Harold Parker State Forest, a sprawling 3,000 plus acre tract of pine and hardwood about an hour north of Cambridge. Close enough that the drive wouldn't kill us, remote enough to feel like we'd actually escaped the city. We'd hiked there once years earlier on a day trip and remembered how vast it felt. You could walk for 6 or 7 solid hours and still not reach the far boundary. 3 nights in early September seemed perfect. Cool nights, no bugs, before the autumn rains arrived. We pooled what little money we had. My beat-up blue hatchback squeaked through inspection just in time. Mark dragged his father's old 2-man tent out of the storage, faded green canvas patched in a few places, but still serviceable. Joey picked up a bargain one-person pup tent from a surplus store. We divided the rest. Sleeping bags, a battered cooler, basic cookware, a fishing rod Joey insisted on bringing, a couple of tarps for rain, and a folded park map Mark grabbed from the ranger station on a previous visit. That was it. We were ready. The Friday afternoon drive-up was the best part. Windows down, Springsteen and Stephen Wolf cranked loud enough to rattle the dashboard. The late summer sun still blazing. We pulled into the gravel parking area near the entrance right as the light began to soften toward evening. Only one other vehicle sat in the lot. We stuffed a few dollars in the honor system envelope at the kiosk, then chose a site beside Berry Pond, a level patch rigged by tall trees, a stone fire ring already in place, pine needles carpeting the ground. Through the trunks, maybe 50 yards away, the pond caught the last copper rays of sunset. It looked like a postcard. We unloaded, pitched the tents, and built a fire. Mark coaxed flames from newspaper and dried twigs. We roasted hot dogs on sticks and warmed canned beans in a pot I'd rescued from my mother's basement. Nothing fancy, but under that sky, surrounded by dark woods and the soft lap of water, it tasted like a feast. Afterward, we cracked open cold beers, dragged a fallen log closer to the flames, and sat in comfortable silence. I stared into the fire and felt weeks of tension uncoil from my shoulders. For the first time in months, I thought, this is exactly what we needed. Saturday, we followed a 3-mile loop trail that circled the pond and climbed to a rocky overlook. The path was tight, leaves whispering overhead, small animals skittering through the brush. From the top of the forest rolled away in every direction, green and endless under bright morning light. We sat on flat stones, passed around trail mix, and just soaked it in. The place felt ancient, untouched, and utterly safe. Sunday followed the same pattern. A longer hike, good tired legs by late afternoon. Mark crawled into the big tent for a nap while I gathered more firewood. We ate as the sun dropped, and then turned in early, exhausted. Joey zipped himself into the small tent a few yards away. I slid into my sleeping bag beside Mark's, already snoring form. The forest settled into near silence, broken only by the occasional rustle or distant owl. Sleep came fast. I woke up freezing. The tent air felt thick and wrong, clammy, far colder than it should have been at that hour. I groped for my flashlight and switched it on and saw the door flap hanging open. Mark's sleeping bag lay empty, boots missing, but his jacket remained balled up in the corner. My watch read just past 4:30. Bladder run, I told myself. He'll be back in a minute. I waited. No footsteps. No low whistle. Nothing. Another minute passed. I sat up, swept the beam around again, then crawled to the flap and peered outside. Total blackness swallowed the light beyond just a few feet. I called Mark's name, quiet at first, not wanting to wake Joey for no reason. No answer. I pulled on boots and a jacket and stepped outside and turned a slow circle. The campsite was empty. Trees loomed like silent giants. I called again, louder. That finally brought movement from Joey's tent. He emerged, bleary-eyed, hair wild, squinting against my flashlight. What's wrong? I explained. He asked the obvious. Maybe Mark just went to piss. I told him I'd already checked, already waited. Joey didn't argue long. He dressed quickly and we split up, sweeping wider circles around the site, shouting Mark's name into the darkness. Nothing. We regrouped. Joey floated the idea that Mark might be sleepwalking. He'd done it as a kid, once wandering clear into the backyard. Unlikely, but possible. We pushed deeper into the trees together this time, careful to stay close. The ground sloped. Roots snagged at our feet. Stalks quickly soaked through. The cold seeped into my bones. The flashlight shook in my hand. After nearly an hour of fruitless searching, Joey froze and aimed his beam at a thorny bush. A scrap of faded blue fabric hung there. Mark's hat, the one he'd worn every day of the trip. My stomach dropped. We kept going, calling his name. 50 feet later, one sock. then the other, then his jeans, folded almost neatly in the dirt, his t-shirt, finally, his boxers, a bizarre, deliberate trail of discarded clothing stretching maybe 60 yards through the undergrowth. We stopped, staring. Joey asked if Mark had been drinking in secret, maybe something stronger than the beer we finished the first night. I couldn't rule it out, but even blackout drunk, Mark wasn't the type to strip naked and wander off. It didn't fit. We shouted louder, voices cracking in the cold. Then the beams caught something ahead. A body lay on its back in a small clearing. No head, just a clean, straight severance at the neck. Blood had pooled and darkened the earth around the shoulders. But the torso itself was unmarked. Pale skin, almost luminous under our lights. No cuts, no bruises, nothing else disturbed. For a long second, my mind refused the image. It looked staged, artificial, like a prop on a movie set. The skin had that strange bluish cast dead bodies sometimes get. The blood around the wound had thickened and looked almost rubbery. I'd never seen a corpse before. I had no reference point. Joey refused to believe it was Mark. He kept yelling the name, circling the body without looking down, voice breaking higher each time. It's not him. It can't be. I stood frozen, being trembling until the obvious truth settled in. The height, the build, no scars, no tattoos. And every piece of clothing we'd followed led straight here. It was him. I forced the words out. Joey, it's Mark. He shook his head, still pacing, tears starting. I said it again, sharper. He finally stopped, covering his face, and broke into wrenching sobs. I went to him, held on while he cried himself quiet. Then I said the only thing left. We have to do something. We ran back to camp, pointless, frantic running, jumped in the car and tore down the access road toward the ranger station in Middletown. 2 rangers were on early duty. We burst in, incoherent, grief-stricken. They gave us coffee, listened, then followed us back to the site as the sky lightened. The ranger who saw the body first only clenched his jaw. He radioed it in. 1 decapitated body, 2 witnesses, and told us to wait at camp. Soon, EBTs arrived, then state police cruisers, lights pulsing silently. They separated us, questioning us hard. Where were you? What did you hear? Did he have enemies? No warmth, no comfort, just suspicion. They seized everything. Tent, sleeping bags, cooler, knives, even our clothes as evidence. We didn't fight it. We just wanted to go home. They drove us to the station anyway, put us in separate gray interrogation rooms. A detective asked the same questions on repeat, probing for jealousy, arguments, hidden motives. I told him the truth every time. Eventually, hours later, they released us both. No charges, but the doubt hung thick. Forensics cleared us a week later. No blood on our gear, no prints, no fibers linking us to the scene. Small relief. The case still went nowhere. No murder weapon ever surfaced. No motive. And most disturbingly, no head. Search teams combed the woods for days. Nothing. Joey moved to Oregon the following year. We stay in loose touch, but we never speak of that night. I stayed local and unraveled. Jobs slipped away. I'd freeze mid-task, see the body again, smell the blood, soaked earth, and walked out. Nights were worse. Recurring dreams of Mark walking deeper into the woods, peeling off clothes as he went, turning to reveal nothing above his shoulders. I'd wake gasping, soaked in sweat. Friends faded. My girlfriend lasted a year before she left. I couldn't talk. Couldn't stop drinking. Eventually, I hit rock bottom. Unemployed, barely eating, skeletal. My sister forced me into treatment. Medication, intensive cognitive behavioral therapy, twice weekly sessions. One therapist suggested writing it down, every detail, to strip away some of its power. It helped a little, not much. Mark's killer was never found. His head never recovered. I still don't understand how or why anyone could remove his head so cleanly and take it away. I avoid forests, avoid even driving past the tree lines. The sight of dense woods make my chest tighten. The man I was before that trip never came back. Part of me is still standing in that clearing beside a headless body, flashlight shaking, waiting for an explanation that never arrived. Just like Mark, that version of myself never made it home. My name is Paul, and back in the 1990s, I worked as a security guard at a modest shopping mall in a small town. People sometimes picture mall security as boring or laughable, especially after that famous movie came out, but I casually left the job before the film hit theaters. These days, I do private security work, but at the time, I was employed straight by the mall itself. The place wasn't one of those sprawling super malls. It had maybe 20 stores, a modest food court, and a central fountain where kids tossed coins and made wishes. What made this mall unusual was the enormous warehouse complex attached to the rear. Stores got allocated sections of that warehouse as part of their lease for extra storage, and plenty of local businesses rented space there too. The result was a sprawling, confusing labyrinth of storage units and corridors behind the scenes. The public shopping area, the part with Radio Shack, Borders, Gadzooks, and various clothing shops, probably made up only about 40% of the entire property. The layout itself was a mess. Half-finished additions, awkward dead ends, escalators that forced you to go down and then up again, just to cross to the other side. If you grew up in that area during the 90s, the combination of the weird floor plan and the big warehouse section would probably tell you exactly which mall I'm talking about. By the time I started, the mall already felt tired and dated. Cramped hallways, low ceilings, general sense of being left behind. Add in that massive, shadowy warehouse area full of blind corners and forgotten spaces, and you can see why they run security around the clock. For my first year or so, the job was mostly routine. The occasional shoplifter, an old man acting creepy toward a teenage girl, a lost child eventually found safe in a photo booth, teenagers daring each other to sneak into the warehouses overnight. Strangely, management came down hardest on those kids who tried to sleep over. They talked about pressing serious charges, even though the trespassers were barely adults. Nothing ever came of it, but the overreaction stuck with me. Maybe they worried about the damage kids could do if left unsupervised. Though the 24-hour patrols, someone would have spotted them fast enough. The strange stuff started about 2 years in. One mid-afternoon, midweek, the mall was humming at a normal pace. I was walking my sector with my partner Chris, while our more experienced coworker Bryn monitored the cameras from the office. Suddenly, Bryn's voice crackled over the radio. Code whatever, unattended package in your area. Abandoned bags still made everyone tense back then. This was only a few years after Oklahoma City. Any forgotten luggage or backpack in a crowded public space got treated very seriously. We picked up plenty of left-behind shopping bags before and never called in the bomb squad. Usually it was obvious they belonged to someone who just stepped away, but the possibility always lingered. This time, the bag was a grimy duffel shoved under a bench near the fountain. No one seemed to be paying any attention. As I got closer, the smell hit me. Sharp, unmistakable urine. I remember thinking, who the hell pisses on their own bomb? That dumb thought, plus the fact that the zippers are partially open and I could see clothes inside, made me reach down and pull the whole thing out. Yeah, I know, idiotic. Present-day me would slap me across the face, but I was young and thought I knew what I was looking at. Inside, one black sweater, black sweatpants, black socks, all filthy, well-worn, reeking. Tucked in with them was an old, much-loved plush cat, the kind of toy a kid carries everywhere until they don't anymore. I tried not to think too hard about what that might mean. Shoved everything back in, radioed Bryn that it was just discarded clothes, and hauled the bag straight to the dumpster out back. Washed my hands for about 10 minutes afterwards. Somehow, I didn't even get written up for grabbing a potential explosive device. A week or two passed quietly. Then Bryn called in another unattended bag. "Don't be stupid this time, kid," he'd said. He'd watched me on camera the first time. The second duffel looked almost identical. Same cheap black brand. Newer and cleaner. No stench. I peeked inside without touching it. No toy this time. Just some junk food wrappers. Twinkies, beef jerky, a few other packaged snacks. I tossed it in the dumpster too and mentioned it casually to the guys. A few days later, a store employee found a third one in the women's dressing room. By then, word had spread about the earlier finds, so they called it in right away. The young woman who discovered it went pale when I mentioned the word explosive. She'd already opened it. Same black clothes inside, but this bag smelled worse than the first. Old, moldy, almost rotten. I took it off her hands and carried it to the dumpster without looking too closely. I wasn't about to go digging through that smell again. 3 identifiable duffel bags. 3 matching sets of cheap black clothes. Chris and I remember were on break together one day, rare for us, and he half joked, maybe someone's living here. I latched onto the idea immediately, building a whole case in my head. The guy was taking fresh clothes from clearance stock in the warehouses, wearing them until they stank, then ditching them starting over. It wasn't some instant Sherlock Holmes moment with string and photos on a corkboard. The theory assembled slowly over weeks of ideal thoughts. A fourth bag turned up in a men's restroom on the lower level. Contents dumped out across the floor like someone had rifled through it, looking for valuables. Probably just another shopper who found it first. Then came my week of night shifts. I like nights anyway. Quiet, good for thinking, especially after a rough breakup. But I almost wanted the chance to poke around the warehouses without anyone hovering. The senior guys had always discouraged wandering back there too much. I later learned some of the rented spaces had private closets, which explained the patchy camera coverage and several complete blind spots, especially in Warehouse B. In the weeks leading up to nights, I started noticing fleeting glimpses. Black-clad figures carrying black duffel bags, melting into crowds or vanishing around corners just before I could get a good look. Faces always half-turned, always just out of reach. I never told anyone. I would have sounded paranoid. First night on the new schedule, I headed straight for Warehouse B. The lights were on. We were allowed to keep them lit during patrol, so it wasn't some horror movie darkness. I walked the route casually at first, then started paying closer attention to the shelving. One unit belonged to a budget clothing store that had gone bankrupt the year before. They'd apparently shut down abruptly and left a ton of stock behind. And that's when I found it. Not a literal animal nest, but a crude little shelter. Several large boxes on the bottom shelf. Opened, arranged, and taped together to form a low hidden room. An opening served as a doorway. It was so obvious I couldn't tell no one had noticed it before me. Part of me still wonders if he wanted me to find it. Me specifically, since I had handled his first bag. I fumbled my expandable baton. Of course, the dramatic wrist flick failed and I had to pull it open manually. Approached and called out. "Anyone in there? Come out with your hands up." Stupid line. We didn't carry guns, but it felt right in the moment. No answer. I used the baton to lift the cardboard flap. The smell was apocalyptic. Not sewage, not garbage, just the concentrated, suffocating reek of unwashed human life. Sleeping bags, some clearly used, others for insulation. More sealed duffel bags, still in the plastic. Stacks of some generic black outfits. Nothing else personal. No ID, no notes, no sinister collection. The stock belonged to the defunct budget clothing store. Cheap, generic, mass-produced, exactly the kind of thing someone could take without anyone noticing right away. The space was empty. He was gone, which meant he could be anywhere. I fumbled the radio, dropped it, picked it up, and called the office. That night, Mom, our sweet baked goods bringing senior guard, was monitoring cameras. I blurted, "Mom, I think there's a guy down here." Before she could respond, every light in Warehouse B snapped off. Pitch black. No timer, no glitch. Someone had flipped the switch. Footsteps, fast and heavy, thundered toward me across the concrete. I get my flashlight up just in time to see a scrawny figure in black charging straight at me. He slammed me at full speed. I crashed backward into a shelf. He stumbled, muttered something under his breath, and sprinted down an aisle. I chased, radioing frantically while trying to keep the beam on him. Eventually, I just yelled for Mom to call the police to the warehouses, dropped the radio, and ran flat out. I lost him for a moment, then heard a door slam. There was a small service area between warehouses A and B, break room, bathrooms. I burst in. Lights were still on there, blinding after the dark. No one waiting to ambush me. The women's bathroom door stood open. The ceiling vent cover lay on the floor. I shone my light up into the duct. Thought I heard faint scraping, crawling sounds moving away. Maybe imagination. On the mirror, in thick black Sharpie, fuck, eat shit. Exact layout. To this day, I don't know if he ran out of room for off or if that's precisely what he intended to say. I didn't crawl in after him. No way. I wasn't dying in a duct for minimum wage. Police arrived quickly. They confirmed we had a long-term squatter. His nests weren't limited to just Warehouse B. They found at least 4 more scattered throughout the mall. Maintenance closets, gaps between stores, crawl spaces, vents. In every one, more black duffels, more black outfits, junk food wrappers. Nothing nutritious. No boots, though. He'd worn heavy ones when he hit me. Those pounding footsteps were unmistakable. Apparently, the boots mattered to him. No manifesto, no trophies, no ID. Just the obsessive pattern of clothes and bags. We never found the plush cat again. I'd thrown his first bag, probably his only sentimental item, into the dumpster. Maybe that's why the mirror message felt so personal. For a while, fuck off and eat shit became dark security team humor. Easier to joke about that than admit how vulnerable the whole mall had been. How someone could live in the walls, move through the vents, watch dressing rooms, bathrooms, anything. Management hushed it up fast. We all quietly agreed it was better not to know the full extent as long as he never returned. Security got much stricter for a time. I left it about 18 months later. 10 years after I quit, I was living across the country with the woman who later became my wife. We'd known each other growing up, but reconnected as adults. She still got the hometown weekly paper mailed by her mom. One issue carried a small article. A man, described as unhoused and in poor health, arrested for stalking, harassment, and conspiracy to kidnap. Multiple women targeted over time. This time, police found a notebook filled with obsessive writings about one young woman in particular. His mugshot looked gaunt, sick. I saw his face only once, frantic, flashlight lit, charging at me in the dark, but I recognized him. I'm certain it was the same man. No dramatic conclusion, no trial details I could ever find. Charges may have been dropped. He may have died, I don't know. What stays with me isn't violence that happened. It's the violence that almost did or still could. The knowledge that someone can live right beside you, unseen, thinking things you'll never understand until it's too late. That thought still wakes me up sometimes, more than any confirmed crime ever could. And that, dear listeners, brings a close to these true crazy stories. I would like to take a moment and acknowledge the rest of the membership of Back to Ashes. Thank you all so much for your continued and dedicated support. I could not be here if it weren't for you. I wouldn't have a voice, and I would not be able to sit here and narrate for you all. I'd be talking to myself. So thank you so much for your love and devotion. If you are sleeping, I hope Slumberland is treating you comfortably. If you're awake, I hope you've enjoyed these selections. Until next time, please stay vigilant and look after yourselves. I'll be reading to you soon. Have yourselves a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening. Peace, love, and light to you all.